morning, good afternoon. It is really a pleasure to be here in Berlin, one of my favorite cities in the world. And I just wanted to thank TOA for creating this platform and this container to nurture and incubate this creative energy that these cities need. The subject matter of my talk is co-creating the regenerative. Keyword here is regenerative cities of the future. And if you look at the initial slide, who knows where that city is from? Can anybody tell me? Maybe you guys are, there's too many millennials in this crowd. But this is the Emerald City. This is the Wizard of Oz. And as a kid, I grew up in an ashram, in a commune, that was started by my grandmother, who was a Jew from Coney Island, who had a vision of Neem Karoli Baba, a very famous guru from India, who was Steve Jobs' guru from Apple. And I grew up sleeping in the floor in the temple. We ate very communally every night together, 100, 150 of us. And it was really, really growing up in a tribe, in a village. So that kind of informed my whole professional and personal lifestyle and has given me kind of this passion for what I'm doing now, which is helping to co-create the cities of the future. And I'd like to start with this quote from Ma Yan-song from Mad Architects. The city of the future development will be shifted from the pursuit of material civilization to the pursuit of nature, biomimicry. This is what happens after human beings experience industrial civilization at the expense of the natural environment. So you can see some of these photos. I don't know if these are big enough, but there's my community, which is basically on the banks of the St. Sebastian River in central Florida, 2.5 hours north of Miami. That is called the Hanuman Temple. My spiritual name is Vajra Hanuman. That's where I was baptized in the Hindu tradition and raised interfaith. And there is a fire puja, which is a traditional Hindu ceremony. And then to the right is an eco-retreat sanctuary that me and my wife, who's in the audience here, Jimena, my life partner, my inspiration, created this eco-retreat sanctuary. So this is the next evolution of growing up in community, which is really a big part of my career. And kind of to frame the discussion, you can see, I started out in an ashram, an interfaith ashram, which is thriving today. And then I left the ashram to rebel, and I became a nightlife promoter in Argentina, which is very different than growing up and being a vegetarian and sleeping on the floor. But nonetheless, a very exciting time in Argentina in 1998. After that, I moved back to Miami and I started working in nightlife, in hospitality, traveling around the world, going to film festivals, and having my Kamala's Garden experience in the book of Siddhartha, for those of you who are familiar with that. And it was really an eye-opening experience for me, going from the spiritual to the material, and then figuring out how to balance the two, and then finding my own way into real estate. And essentially, I got into real estate brokerage selling in Miami. I wanted to be a realtor to the stars, essentially, and found that very boring initially. And my first real estate investment happened in an apartment in an area next to the Performing Arts Center that was being planned that people didn't know about that, with $9,000 that I had saved in the nightlife industry. And I borrowed a private loan at 11% from a loan shark. And essentially, a year later, I sold that apartment for 3 times the value. At that point, I had the aha moment where I realized art and culture's impact on real estate value. I started to learn about gentrification, started to learn about the positive and negatives of rising real estate costs. So that was an interesting transition. And then very early got involved in the Wynwood Arts District, which many of you are familiar with, is one of the most famous outdoor street art museums and one of the creative neighborhoods in the world. Was very involved early on in creating the business improvement district there. So I went from that, and then my latest venture, which we'll get into later, is Magic City Innovation District in Little Haiti, which is an 8 million square foot city of the future, fully mixed use, whose ambition is to be fully regenerative and be a model for city building in other places in the world. This is some photos of Wynwood and my first building that I bought, which actually I'm pleased to announce. Recently, we created a partnership with The Collective, with my dear friend Reza, who's here in the audience. So that was one of the first buildings I bought in Wynwood. It was an old 1936 warehouse that we adaptively repurposed and brought in a lot of really interesting brands. And now we're planning a 12-story building that will hopefully be very focused kind of on eco-solutions as well as building the arts community, because one of the challenges with Wynwood is that all the artists essentially that helped create the neighborhood can no longer afford to be there. And so these are some of the solutions that we're working on in Wynwood. Okay, let's frame the conversation. I have to apologize in advance that I thought I had 20 minutes, but apparently I only have 17 minutes. So I'll try not to bore you with the statistics, but this is very central to my thesis around the future of cities. So human overpopulation. Let's talk about some of the macro issues that are impacting cities and civilization today. By 2050, the United Nations estimates the world population to be close to 10 billion people, an increase of 2 billion from today. In addition to that, there's the migration and overcrowding of cities. Within the next 30 years, 6.7 billion people will live in cities. That's 68%. So there's this massive shift into cities, a 60% increase, essentially. So coupled with that is suburban sprawl. By 2050, urban suburban built area is expected to triple relative to where it was in early 2000s. Levels as densities continue to decline by 2% a year. And this is important when we talk about why density is important. Much of this will be concentrated in biosensitive areas such as Africa and Southeast Asia. In addition to biomass loss from habitat destruction, inefficient methods of construction, concrete and steel, will contribute to major additional carbon pollution. On top of that, there's increased inequality leading to civil unrest because of lack of access to education and because of the disparity between rich and poor. So affordable housing, educational opportunities, inefficient transportation, and basically has rendered hotbeds of advancement inaccessible to most members of society. This finally coupled with climate change refugee crisis, which we're now in the midst of, will possibly leave 1 billion people by 2050 as climate change refugees, additionally adding to the strain on cities. So these are some of the issues. These are not all of the issues. And I'm an optimist. You know, I grew up in a commune with a visionary guru, mother who adopted me. So I believe that innovation and technology and our desire as humanity to save ourselves will help provide those solutions if we leverage them correctly. So let's talk about some of the solutions. Tech. Oh, there we go. Okay, some of the solutions. One, mobility, leveraging technology and smart urban planning to maximize transit efficiency. Shared space, that was talked about before, promoting densification, affordability and inclusivity, and community building, which I think is critical. Intelligent zoning, go up, not out. I think this is very important as we talk about, with my developer hat on, a lot of people fight against density and they fight against height. But again, I think that's something that we really need to address critically. It's not an easy thing to solve, but what we don't want is concrete surrounding the planet. That I think we can all agree on is not a solution, not a world we want to live in. Creative reuse of obsolete space. One example is urban architecture, urban agricultural farming, urban farming, vertical farming. You have hundreds of millions of square feet of obsolete garages today that will only continue to grow, for example. So how do we reimagine the parking garage as one example? New building technology and alternative building materials, reduce waste, your carbon footprint and construction site dangers, etc. And then finally, and these are not all the solutions, these are solutions that I'm focused on, is public-private partnerships to create people, planet, profit. Basically, how do we get to the triple bottom line? And I believe that that's the way forward because that's a sustainable model. It's not only foundations and philanthropy, not only the responsibility of the government, but also the responsibility of the private sector. But you need to incentivize the private sector properly to take on these ambitious projects like Magic City, which I've been involved in for almost a decade and hasn't produced a financial return for me yet. So those are the types of things that we're exploring in our world, and I'll get a little bit more into it. Obviously, we don't have enough time to really get into these issues in any great detail, but I'm very passionate about it. I'm happy to discuss it with you guys afterwards. In the United States, 60% of all rides are within 6 miles. So in the rest of the world, that's probably much smaller than that, but that's an important important statistic that I think we should all try to understand. So investing in both mass transit and the interface between major transportation hubs and micromobility, bikes, scooters, AVs, could allow for the elimination of personal cars in the city altogether. And my personal vision is that within the urban core, there are no cars at all. And why is that? I mean, think about the environments that really focus, that are human-centric, that focus on the person and the pedestrian. Those are the places that we want to live. Those are the places I want to live. And this is another slide that will kind of show that. So look at this slide. So the space required to transport 60 people. On the left-hand side, those are what cars can transport and how much space it takes up on the road. The next is the bus, and the next is the bicycle. From Donald Shoup, most people in transportation focus on the 5% of the time that cars are moving. But the average car is parked 95% of the time. I think there's a lot to learn from that 95%. So de-emphasis on the automobile is critical. And I think Europe is way more advanced than we are in the United States with this, but there's a very strong oil and gas and automobile lobby that wants to continue to build roads, which is completely obsolete at this point. So these are types of real critical issues that really require paradigm shifts in urban planning and policy at the governmental level. But they need to be taken in concert as a global plan, because everything that affects us in the United States affects everybody else and affects the entire planet. So these are macro issues that we really need to address. Number 2, leveraging the shared economy. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Essentially, space in the urban core as population grows is going to become so much more valuable. And unless we use it efficiently, it's not going to be sustainable. So that's why we're seeing the disruption of every single asset class in real estate. Co-working in the office space, Airbnb in the hotel space, co-living, we're going to see hundreds of brands. Here are some examples like The Collective and others. Food halls you're seeing. I'm even seeing hair salons using, shared spaces. Cloud kitchens where you could now have 10 different concepts delivered to your home within that last mile. And so last mile logistics and transportation becomes very critical. And through automation and through machine learning, you're going to start seeing all of that stuff evolve and become more and more efficient. But it just comes back to a finite amount of space in a place where we're growing our population, and how do we manage that? But the other key, I think, to the shared economy is the community that it's building. Again, going back to the ashram and being raised in a vision, we're at a place where depression is at an all-time high, I think largely due to technology, because we're with this in front of our face, our devices, and we're not making that human connection. So it's really important. I think these trends are not only technological trends, they're not only demographic shifts, but these are our longing to be part of community and be part of something, and something that's purpose-driven and something with intention. And so I think that's also what's fueling these types of trends that are happening, and I think this is very positive. So, solution 2. Solution 3, intelligent upzoning. Go up, not out. And I know a lot of activists and a lot of people are not a fan of going high and going dense, but please tell me another solution that makes sense with all the things that I listed earlier, because I'd love to hear them, because I don't want to live in a city where there's no sunlight, where there's no green space. But again, my vision of the future is Emerald City, where everything is green, where basically we're mimicking nature, and we have green roofs and green walls, and where buildings basically become autonomous, and they can adapt to the environment, and they can read what's happening outside. And so I think with all these smart people around the world, with all this technology that's coming out, solutions are there. We just need to invest in them, and we haven't really invested in research and development enough in this space. So let's talk about all the obsolete real estate, within the world that's not being optimized or utilized in the way that it should be. In the US alone, 100 million square feet of mall space is either dark or expected to go dark over the next decade. driven by the internet retail disruption. Similarly, a majority of parking in the United States is expected to become redundant due to autonomous vehicle proliferation. Cities like Los Angeles alone, this represents over 60 kilometers of open space that can be put to better use. Me, I'm very passionate about organic farming. We have a permaculture program at the ashram and our retreat center at ChoZen, and I see about, the concept behind permaculture is the least amount of inputs for the most amount of output. And it's the same concept with urban farming. And, basically it's studied and believed that, or big data is modeling of urban space suggests that there's a potential for 10% of all of our vegetables could be produced in an urban setting. And what this will do is reduce the logistics and carbon footprint of getting your vegetables. And it's a beautiful thing to be involved in, and it's a green space, so it can become park, and it can employ people. So that's a regenerative reuse of space, and that's how really I got my career started, was taking old dilapidated warehouses from the 50s and repurposing them to creative uses with artists. So that was basically what I saw as a blank canvas. And I think that's what all of this unused space is for us to imagine, this blank canvas of creative space that we can reimagine and repurpose, leveraging technology and things like urban farming to really create amazing solutions within the urban context. Let's see. Okay, new building methodology, maintenance, and materials. Current state of affairs. Construction industry is massively underinvested in innovation. Less than 1% of revenues are dedicated to research and development. While a US figure, this underinvestment is rampant across many global markets with a lower cost of labor. Construction productivity has not increased with the broader economy, driving pressure on building prices and housing. The carbon footprint of traditional construction materials, cement and steel, is unsustainable, with concrete the third largest global source of CO2. I don't know if you understand this, but the built environment is expected to double or potentially triple within the next 30 years. Where do you think the bulk of the concrete material comes from? It comes from sand. Sand at the bottom of rivers and oceans, which is disrupting our entire ecosystem. There is not enough sand to build the world to meet the demand of the future. That's a major, major issue. If we don't innovate, we're going to continue to exacerbate the problem. So we need to really invest in innovation. That's the key, really invest in innovation. So current sand usage is at 50 billion tons, 2.5 times the amount produced by every river system in the world, okay? Some of the solutions we talked about are biophilic design, sequestering carbon, modular buildings, geospatial work sites, and alternatives such as ashcrete, mycelium, and hemp. So there are many other alternatives, but there's a lot of strong industries that are fighting against this for their own personal profit, which is a major issue. We need to get away from profit that's not aligned with the future of our planet and doesn't represent the triple bottom line. And that's really what my mission is, and I believe that all of these new innovations will be profitable, but we need to invest in them up front. We need to pay it forward. And finally, one of the other solutions that we're addressing here is leveraging public-private partnerships, which is something that's very familiar in the United States, to create people, planet, profit results. In the real estate industry, we often take the form of transit-oriented developments, okay, around transit, which is much less advanced than you see here in Europe, for example. But using tax incentives, special financing, grants, and careful planning, governments can sufficiently mitigate projects to make compelling for private sector players. One of the examples that we saw here is in Curitiba in Brazil. The governor just said, I'm wiping out all the zoning regulations. I need a private developer who knows what they're doing. We need to come up with a solution that will solve our transit issues. What they came up with was the BRT, which was the bus rapid transit, which was developed for 50 times less than the cost of rail, okay, with station payments, and essentially the profit was around the development around the stops. This garnered, was a huge success and garnered awards and made Curitiba the winner of the 40 most sustainable cities in 2016. So there are examples of public-private partnerships that work. And it really is going to take that type of collaboration for us to solve these big issues. It's not only the responsibility of governments, it's not only the responsibilities of the private sector, it's going to require a collaboration, but really a concerted effort that's really honest and has integrity to go ahead and find these solutions. So what am I doing in my own career to further this mission of creating cities of the future? So in 2005, I stumbled across this former trailer park, 110-year-old trailer park in Miami, in this underserved neighborhood of Little Haiti, which is very culturally and historically rich, but very poor. And I walked in this park, and I just was enamored by how beautiful it was. 300 champion oak trees, very green, very lush, as opposed to Wynwood, which is more of a concrete jungle. And I said, this is special. There's an opportunity here to amass a large swath of land and do something where I can be completely creative. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a developer. I consider myself a real estate artist. You know, and I love to just kind of visualize, like the Emerald City, of what something would look like in the future. And so it was completely speculative, but I ended up going in contract in 2005, and then I let the contract go, and then the market tanked. And then in 2012, I went back into contract on the same site, and since then, kind of the story has evolved. I brought in my first investor, who was a VC from Silicon Valley and from California, and then 3 years ago, I met Guy Laliberté, the founder of Cirque du Soleil at Burning Man, and pitched him on the concept of Magic City as a city of the future. He came on board really to focus on the entertainment side and entertainment tech. And here we are now. Last week, we just got approved after many years of struggling, working with the city and the community, and we were approved for 8 million square feet, or 800,000 meters, to build a mixed-use, transformative city of the future called Magic City Innovation District in Little Haiti, and focused around these 4 pillars: technology, art and entertainment, sustainability and resilience, which is a big issue in South Florida. As you know, we're at sea level, essentially, and health and wellness. So it's kind of a culmination of bringing all of these things together and really trying to iterate and create a city of the future. Now, we've been approved for our entitlements: 2,600 apartments, 2 million square feet of office, 500 hotel rooms, but essentially we just have the container with which to co-create with folks like yourself to come and create a laboratory of what this city looks like. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm just a student here learning, and I have a vision of what really feels right to me instinctually. However, you know, these things are community-based, and I don't build buildings, I build community, because buildings are nothing without the community that lives inside of them, right? That's what we're working on. So that's a journey I've been on for the last, 8, 10, 13 years in Magic City, and it's just beginning. So I encourage you all to get involved in any way that you want. I've been speaking to Nico about doing a TOA Miami, possibly around Winter Music Conference. So who knows? We'll keep you posted on that. Yeah. So what's next for me? So recently, I launched this new platform, which we're calling a platform, which is called the Future of Cities. And it's the intersection of the digital environment and the built environment to create sustainable, regenerative urban nodes, cities and neighborhoods, leveraging opportunity zones. In the United States, it's a new tax scheme that the Trump administration came up with, which is one of the few positive, potentially positive things that they've done in my view, and impact investing. So it's part urban real estate opportunity fund, part venture fund focused on smart city technology and prop tech, future city consultancy, and all leveraging technology opportunity zones and public-private partnerships, 100% impact focus, people, planet, profit. So if anybody's interested in learning how they can get involved in that capacity, but it's really essentially leveraging technology, investing in companies that are going to help enable the cities of the future that we want, okay? That's essentially the concept. So building these regenerative ecosystems within the urban context. And I think the goal is to create models that are not models you can copy, but models that you can take best practices and bring back to your cities and your communities to hopefully help create solutions for these big issues. And I'm going to leave you with this quote. from Abraham Lincoln and Peter Drucker. And the backdrop is the overview effect. Last year was the 50th anniversary of the Apollo mission. It was the first time that a human being had seen Earth from space. And there's a condition, a scientific condition called the overview effect, which is a dramatic shift in consciousness when some big event happens to you. And almost every astronaut you talk to will tell you how this changed their perspective of the oneness, essentially, of planet Earth. And realizing that we're not countries, an individual, or white or black. We are one ecosystem, one planet. And so the best way to predict the future is to create it. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I went a little bit over, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Tony. Please come to Dublin because we need you. I live in the Silicon Docks and lots of business energy, but we're losing community. So please come and share your wisdom there. We need you. Now, from the people, how could people who don't have any skills join the local community?
So I think everybody has something to say and something to offer. So skills, I think, can be trained and learned, and I think it's providing people access. So things that we're working on is free internet, which doesn't sound like a lot in Europe, but in the United States, that's not a right for everybody. I think everybody should have free access to the internet. So those are types of things that we're working with cities and municipalities to try to create, for example. But in Magic City, we're partnering up with a traditionally, historically black college to really provide scholarships so underserved people in those communities can get the training they need, because ideally, we want them to live and work in the project. That was one of the criticisms. Well, you're going to have properties, but the local community that makes $30,000 a year cannot afford to live there. How do we solve that?
Yeah, massive problem in San Francisco, of course. Now, those electric scooters, really cool. I see them all over Berlin. What do you think of that?
I'm a big supporter of micromobility. The problem is that our cities weren't designed to accommodate them. So now the urban planning and the municipalities need to collaborate and figure out ways to really encourage this in a safe way. San Francisco has approved it, banned it, removed it. So I think at this stage, it's really about taking places like Magic City and starting from the beginning. How do we incorporate this, autonomous vehicles and all the future technology, into our planning?
We need to figure out how to clone Tony Cho. Thanks a million. That was brilliant.
Thank you.